Instantly, the grace of Allah and His pleasure. سِيمَاهُمْ فِي وُجُوهِهِمْ مِنْ أَثَرِ السُّجُودِ. You'll see the sign of their faith on their face. Right? From the effect of doing so much sajda, you'll see that their foreheads are rough. Like some people have this like a little bit rough, like a scar tissue on their foreheads. Like if it's from sajda, from doing sajda so much, then it's a great sign. It's one of these signs that's praised in this particular surah. Then it says, ذَلِكَ مَثَلُهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاتِ. This is how they've been described in the Torah. Right? So it indicates that in the Torah there is a prophecy that the prophet at the end of time, he and his companions are going to look like this. They're going to worship a lot. They're going to be gracious with the believers, harsh with the non-believers, and you're going to see the sign of their faith on their face. Right? That's a description that was found in the Torah that this verse is telling us. ذَلِكَ مَثَلُهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاتِ. Then it says, وَمَثَلُهُمْ فِي الْإِنْجِيلِ. In the Injil, the way they're described is the following. كَزَّرْءٍ أَخْرَجَ شَطْأَهُ فَآزَرَهُ فَاسْتَغْلَظَ فَاسْتَوَى عَلَى سُوقِهِ يُعْجِبُ الزُّرَّاعَ لِيَغِيظَ بِهِمُ الْكُفَّارِ. It describes this image. It says it in the Injil. They're described very poetically, like a plant that grows. And you plant a seed. It puts up its shoot. It starts to grow. Right? As it grows, it gets stronger and stronger. When it grows large enough that it drops its seeds and more start coming up. Like this image of growth, strength, and spreading. Right? That's the image that the Bible is trying to communicate. That this is how the Prophet and his companions are going to be. Right? It's a very poetic sort of description of them. So in any case, this verse it then indicates that in the Torah and the Injil, there was explicit mention of our Prophet and even his companions, that there will be with these attributes. Right, one more verse is 43:63. وَلَمَّا جَاءَ عِيسَى بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ قَالَ قَدْ جِئْتُكُمْ بِالْحِكْمَةِ وَلِأُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي تَخْتَلِفُونَ فِيهِ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُونِي. When Jesus brought clear proofs, he said, I have brought you wisdom, and I have come to clarify you some of the things about which you differ. So fear God and obey me. Okay. So first of all, he says he brought clear proofs. Bayyinat in the Quran usually refers to miracles. And so this is a brief mention of all those miracles that we had details of in the previous verses. I brought you wisdom. We've seen that mentioned before. It's a repeat. And I have come to clarify for you some of the things about which you differ. This is one of the missions of the prophets. They're not spiritual leaders, and they're not solely spiritual leaders. Right? There's a Western kind of mentality that prophets and religious people are just they're spiritual leaders. They're here to help you in your relationship with God only. That's a very limited kind of view of religion, and it's a very limited view of the prophets and their role. They weren't simply spiritual leaders. Even Isa alayhi salam, he's been made into a monk type figure by Christians. He wasn't like that. None of the prophets were like that. Prophets were political people. They were warriors. They were leaders of people. They were judges. And this explicitly says that Jesus came to settle differences. People have disputes all the time. This is one of the integral what do you call it, problems of society. We argue, we differ with each other over property rights, over obligations and rights and responsibilities, marriage problems, and kids' rights on their parents, and vice versa. So we have all these problems. Somebody has to solve those, and we can come up with an arbitrary law based on common law and our own sort of estimation, like we have here in America and other countries, or we can have a divine law written by someone who knows us and knows the ideals and knows what we're heading towards, and he tells us what our limits are, what the law is. And then he sends a judge who can then judge amongst us and decide who's right and who's wrong, who has to pay whom, and who has to give fines and so forth. Right? So that's the ideal, and that's what will happen, inshallah. All the other prophets failed because people weren't ready for it. Right? Failed because they didn't have the supporters amongst people. All of our imams also failed because, again, they didn't have the support of the people. The Prophet wasn't able to do it 100%. His government, it lasted only as long as he lasted. It fell apart as soon as Abu Bakr took over. Imam Ali's government also, it was very, very weak. Again, I'm never insinuating that it was them who was weak. It was the people, their supporters, who were weak. They backed out. God legitimizes those governments, but it's the people who have to be there. They have to support the government before it can stand on its own 2 feet. So Imam Hassan, he's even in a worse state than his father, Imam Ali. Imam Hassan, he starts going waging war on Muawiyah to complete Siffin that Imam Ali wasn't able to complete because his people backed out on him. He goes to try to complete it with Siffin number 2, and he doesn't even get to Siffin, and all of his troops back away. He's left alone. They actually stabbed him in his leg on the way. And then Imam Hussein, we see what happens to him as well. He's called, and then everyone backs out at the last minute, and he's left with nothing. And after that, they didn't even try anymore. Imam Zayn al-Abidin and on, they never even tried to re-establish his government because they didn't have the support at all. But the message is that every one of the Imams and every one of our prophets, from Adam until our prophet, every one of them, their goal and their desire was to establish a just, rightful, righteous government on earth. The same things that we expect Imam Mahdi to do, and he will inshallah do. All the prophets were here to do that. So they're not simply spiritual leaders. They're here as practical leaders for every aspect of our lives, to guide us, to help us, to establish governments, to rule over us, and then judge between us. Right, so he explicitly says, I've come to clarify for you some of the things about which you differ. So fear God and obey me. Here again, he's emphasizing, God's the one to fear. Don't fear me. Fear God, worship Him, but then you have to obey me because I'm His prophet, I'm His messenger. Inna Allah, this is the continuation. This is also in 4364. It's this Surah 43 Az-Zukhruf. Inna Allah huwa Rabbi wa Rabbukum fa'buduh hada siratul mustaqim. God is my Lord and your Lord, so worship Him. This is the straight path. We had this verse before, so I won't say anything about this. This is the last verse I want to share with you today. It's a very long verse, and it's the one that we read at the beginning of the session. It's towards the end of Surah Al-Ma'idah has a lot of these verses. It narrates a conversation that's going to take place on the Day of Judgment between Allah and Isa alayhi salam. إِذْ قَالَ اللَّهُ يَا عِيسَى ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ أُذْكُرْ نِعْمَتِي عَلَيْكَ وَعَلَى وَالِدَتِكَ إِذْ أَيَّدْتُكَ بِرُوحِ الْقُدُسِ تُكَلِّمُ النَّاسَ فِي الْمَهْدِ وَكَهْلًا وإذ علمتك الكتاب والحكمة والتوراة والإنجيل وإذ تخلق من الطين كهيئة الطير بإذني فتنفخ فيها فتكون طيرا بإذني by my permission, by my leave وتبرئ الأكمه والأبرص بإذني وإذ تخرج الموتى بإذني وإذ كففت بني إسرائيل عنك إذ جئتهم بالبينات فقال الذين كفروا منهم إن هذا إلا سحر مبين. So I counted 4 or 5 times he says bi'idhni, to emphasize that all of the miracles he did were by the leave of God, and he has no independent role in those miracles. Right, there are a couple of interesting things about this verse I want to point out. One is this this place here where he says, "Remember my blessings upon you." First of all, this whole verse is enumerating all of the miracles and all the blessings that Allah has showered upon Jesus and His mother. In the Quran, they're considered one unit. In several instances, they're not considered. They're almost like they're not two separate entities. The mother and son together are considered one sign of God. Right? Both together are an ayah from Allah. He says this: "Remember when I supported you through the Holy Spirit, so that